What is up, everybody? Zack Rosenblatt here at Nova Care Complex with Mike Kaye, who's feeling a little under the weather, but he's powering through it for you guys. The latest episode of the No Huddle Show, midweek edition. We had a few days to rest up after that Thursday game. It was really nice to have that weekend off and be able to sit down. And did you watch football on Sunday? And I did nothing. I had Chinese food and I plopped down on my couch. It was beautiful.
My parents were in town,
so
you
you were actually more stressed than if you were at a game.
Pretty much. But I did watch a lot of football. It was lovely, and now I'm sick because my kid was sick.
So it wasn't quite a bye week for you, is what you're saying?
No, it was a good bye week. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Like, good Mike joke, everybody.
Hey,
put it on the board.
Every now and then.
Put it on the board.
We should note that I am holding the microphone close to my mouth. As close as possible. Hopefully I don't get it sick, but we've heard about the sound complaints and we are working on them. So
there was one day I went home and my dad, the first thing he said to me before basically even saying hi was, tell Mike to pull the mic away from his face.
Wait, away from it or towards?
Oh, towards. Sorry. I mean, talk into the microphone, basically.
Oh, well,
yeah, good call.
Here we are. Zach's dad.
Zach's dad. His name's Mike too, actually.
Shouts, Mike.
All right, but yeah, so a few things happened over the last few days. We'll hit the newsy stuff. What I want to start doing for our midweek pod each week, we're going to each come up with like 3 thoughts, observations, statements that we have about the Eagles that week leading up to the next game, thinking backwards. Just give this a little structure, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But first, I feel like we should talk about the injury updates that we got today first. Number one, it seems like DeSean Jackson's probably not playing this week, and you don't really need him to play. If you need DeSean to beat the Jets, then you're not a good team. So I think you can be okay with that. He's not practicing, and I'd be surprised if he did. Sidney Jones did walk through. He has a hamstring injury. They're probably going to see how Doug sounded way more optimistic about him than any of the other guys. So maybe he plays this week, but again, I don't know if you necessarily you can rest guys. You don't want to look at it as a bye week because that's how teams get upset in the NFL. But I would rest him personally.
They're 14-point favorites.
Yeah, with all this injury knowledge there already. And then Avonte Maddox is still in concussion protocol, is what Doug said. Avonte Maddox, and he has a neck sprain. Sounds like he'll be out a few weeks, according to Ian Rappaport's report. And then Ronald Darby did not practice either. He made it sound like he's going to be out a little while. He has his hamstring also. And then, so today, Jason Kelce wasn't at practice. That wasn't injury related. They said personal reasons. It's a very good chance, by the time you listen to this podcast, it might come out that his wife was due.
Super due.
So I imagine that's probably what, without making complete assumptions, I think that's a safe guess that he had his first kid. And if so, congratulations, Jason.
If not, hang in there.
Hang in there, bud. Staying at the hospital, and I'm sure you know that experience.
Yeah.
But
I do.
So, I feel like you can start feeling a little more optimistic about this team. I know there's a lot of guys hurt, but in the next few weeks, they're going to start getting some of these guys back. I think you can feel a little better than maybe you did 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the outlook, even beyond the next 2 weeks, Week 7, Jalen Mills is eligible to return from his foot injury, and then Week 9, Cre'Von LeBlanc's eligible to return from his foot injury.
And then around then, Darby should be getting healthy. Jernigan should be getting healthy.
Yeah, I think we've always looked at this as a second half.
Like you've been saying, they need to go 500 to start out. Yeah.
Right. If they can go 500 or better in the first half, this team's going to definitely be a playoff team. And I think potentially a division winner now that you looked at how the Cowboys lost to the Saints on Sunday night. They're only a game back. They'll play each other in the first half of the season. So there's a very good chance that the Cowboys and the Eagles could be even after 8 games. And then the back half of the Eagles schedule, while it's not a cakewalk, is certainly much easier than the first half.
You're at home a lot, too.
And you play most of your division games.
And you only get on the plane once, and it's to Miami, so it's basically a vacation.
Well, yes, but,
especially that late in the season, they'll be full on tanking too.
Yeah, that's the type of game though that you got to be really weary of. Coming off 2 games against pretty good teams in the Seahawks and the Patriots.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the Dolphins will have a lot of young guys trying to prove they belong in the league and all that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, I think the Dolphins are going to be one of the more dangerous opponents in the last month of the season.
Because everybody's just going to be writing them off, yeah.
Well, that and everybody's looking to earn a job next year. They probably want to get away from Miami, so probably want to play pretty well.
Half the team did demand trades. So.
Yeah, supposedly. Allegedly.
Speaking of that, for our weekly Jalen Ramsey, you and I joked before the podcast that the day we can stop talking about these rumors will be a great day. He's still on the block, and the latest is that the Eagles gave an offer before the Packers game of a first and a second, which I think obviously isn't going to get it done. I think everybody knows that. I'm sure Howie knew that when if he made that offer. Chris Mortensen's the one that reported it. He's pretty well connected with the Eagles. His stuff usually seems to.
He's also extremely connected with the Jaguars.
Yeah, so. and he's a pro. But like my just initial takeaway was like, that's like a Howie move. Like the whole rumor with the Melvin Gordon thing. Like he's always gonna. If we find out about it, I'm sure it's on purpose almost to let everybody know that he's trying. I don't know if that necessarily means they're seriously considering giving up multiple first-round picks or not. We've talked about this on this pod a lot. We don't need to like dwell on it too much, but they are pretty banged up there, obviously. He'd be better than everybody if everybody was healthy anyway. He's worth trading multiple first-round picks for. I don't know if more than 2, but I would give up 2 firsts for him.
So the deal, when we did our prop deals, where I said a first, a second, and Big V. Now I think Big V is very hard to trade when you factor in how the offensive line has worked, and the extra blocker, and how well they've done with the extra blocker, and how much they've used him in different spots. But, yeah, I agree with you. I call some of these Howie trade proposals, or the reported ones, or leave it deals. Yeah. Where he just throws it out there. Hey, if you want it, here we go.
It can't hurt to try.
Right. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if this week he upped the value to maybe a first, a second, and a third,
Just like slowly, incrementally.
Right. And I think the big deal, and I said this when we made our prop trades, is I think the big win for Howie will be avoiding giving up 2 first-round picks. And that's hard to pull off because the Eagles are probably going to have a 25 to 32 pick in those first rounds. They're a team that's going to be a contender. The thing is, Shad Khan wants to get 2 premium first-round picks, but what team in their right mind who doesn't know if they're going to contend is trading for...
So it's not as appealing of first-round picks.
Right.
And the Jaguars could win that division.
Right. And just based off what I've heard is they're not in a rush to trade him. He doesn't really have the leverage that everybody thinks he does because he's in his 4th year and he still needs to build an accredited season. Yeah. And if he doesn't have that could cost...
How many games is that?
I believe it's 6. So right now he has 4 because he was on the active roster.
So holding out doesn't really get him anywhere.
Right, exactly. And they could, go after, his 5th-year option, which would alter the way he might make that money. Maybe it's lowered. Who knows? I'm not really sure how that works. It's never really happened before. Guys like Melvin Gordon, guys like Jadeveon Clowney, guys like Le'Veon Bell had the franchise tag or the 5th-year option to kind of play against. Here, Jalen's still got 2 years left on his deal, including this year. And you know what? That ownership group loves him. I can tell you that for a fact. They are very invested in him, and they want to sign him. Yeah. The art is convincing him to stay.
Yeah, he's the one that wants to leave. It's not that they want to get rid of him.
Right. But the Jaguars are the ones that have the control because Ramsey really doesn't have the leverage. So, I think he could be traded this year, but I think it's going to be a long, drawn-out process. I started this season with gray in my beard. You're starting to get some. I think by the time we're done, I could be looking like Burt Reynolds. You know what I mean?
There'll be 4 more rumors about our next podcast, probably. So
yeah.
It is interesting that it seems like the Eagles are the only team lately that you've been hearing about with Ramsey. I'm sure that's on purpose.
Right. The Ravens had a nice offer. I heard that the Chiefs were somewhat involved.
It seemed like that all was coming early on in the demand of trade. And by the way, the trade deadline is October 29th, which is after week 8, so they have plenty of time. They have more than 3 weeks to decide.
Right. This week made a lot of sense because of the excess days that you had. The Eagles have brought in 2 practice squad corners, and Ryan Lewis and DJ White both have experience and kind of bounce around the league a little bit. And they also re-signed Orlando Scandrick. So they're going to be short at cornerback as far as guys that have been established in this defense. Right now, you're looking at 3 healthy cornerbacks on the 53-man roster: Rasul Douglas, Orlando Scandrick, and Craig James. I should say Lambeau legend, Craig James.
The highest-rated cornerback in the NFL right now, according to Pro Football Focus.
Bananas, because he's played 3 snaps.
Well, that's why it's like that, probably, yeah. Small sample size, yeah.
And then I think what will happen is they'll have Lewis and White compete in practice.
In case Jones doesn't play, yeah.
Well, I think they're bringing a guy up even if Jones plays because you never know with that hamstring injury. You don't want to be stuck like you were in Green Bay. Yeah. So, let's say Jones plays, right? I think they'll have Lewis and White compete. White's played all 3 corner positions. I mean, Lewis is a guy who actually played 3 games earlier this season, was just recently cut. So he's in football shape. He can play. Martin Frank from Delaware.com actually pointed this out to me today. Ryan Lewis is wearing 37. DJ White's wearing 41. Both numbers that Jonathan Cyprien wore while he was in Philadelphia. That's called a segue.
Yeah, we'll get into our 3 thoughts deal now. We can start with that. So the Eagles made a trade with the Atlanta Falcons on Monday night. The days are all weird because they had the Thursday game, so I had to think about it. But so Monday they traded Jonathan Cyprien and a 7th to the Atlanta Falcons for linebacker Duke Riley and a 6th-round pick. Just some background. So Duke Riley was a 3rd-round pick at LSU in 2017. So he played with Jalen Mills. He was their starting linebacker for 2 years, and then he pretty much was demoted to only special teams. So I found like an old video of him pulling a car, and I tweeted that out. I'm like, this is the Eagles' new linebacker, Duke Riley. He's pretty strong. And I've never had so much response from a different fan base before, where they just like the amount of vitriol for this guy. Like they're like, yeah, that's all they can do. We fell for that too. He's terrible. He can't cover anybody. So I don't know enough about him. You probably know more than I do, but it doesn't sound like he had for like what he was as a draft pick. He probably didn't live up to that. But he's going to replace LJ Fort essentially on special teams, is my read, right?
So my first thought. I guess I'll do it because we're doing it.
Yeah. This is Mike's first thought.
Format it. Yeah, I know Zack really carried that one.
We need one of those like narrator guys.
Yeah.
Number one.
That reminded me of Mortal Kombat a little bit. Anyway, round 1. Fight. So here's the thing with Duke Riley. It was a 1-year starter at LSU. Had a bananas combine. Bananas. Bananas, if you're unaware.
Like he just tested really well?
Oh, my God. He came in at 6'1", 232 pounds. I think he had a 34.5-inch vertical, a 4.6 second 40, and his 3-cone was in like the 6.8s. Like he was, that's very good. And so he's a bit of a workout warrior.
A white warrior?
Yeah. I was thinking about Mike Mamula, and I was all right. Anyway, brain. So yeah, his combine was off the charts, and he was a guy who's super athletic. You brought up the car thing. I think he did really well on the bench too, if I'm not mistaken. But high upside guy. When you're a 1-year starter and you have really good athletics, coaches and GMs look at you as a guy that you can kind of build upon. You don't have like the bad habits or whatever. So what they did was the Falcons drafted Riley in the 3rd round, 75th pick overall, before Kareem Hunt, Rasul Douglas. Who's the other really good one?
Well, that draft had a bunch of guys in like the 3rd, 4th round.
I'm trying to remember, but there was like one that was like, oh my,
yeah.
I'll get back to that later. Anyway, so he, like you said, he was a starter, but he was also he was only a 2-down linebacker. He was essentially a 2-down weak side linebacker. Struggled a bit. I think he had 20 combined missed tackles in his first 2 seasons. That's bad. And this season, he was relegated to special teams duty. He appeared in all 4 games, didn't produce a tackle, but he's been graded very well on Pro Football Focus his first 2 years in the league on special teams. Look, I think this was a good trade for both teams. A lot of people are going to say, who cares? Well, when you start off at who cares, it only can go up from there, right?
And they gained a draft pick. Yeah.
Right. So Jonathan Cyprien played 15 defensive snaps his first 4 games in Philly.
And most of them were that 4th game, yeah.
Right, because there were injuries. He was playing mostly on special teams, a role that he really wasn't comfortable with. He was awkward. He missed some tackles. He looked out of place a lot of the time. The Falcons just lost Keanu Neal, their starting strong safety, to an Achilles injury. Cyprien can fit in right away. He plays kind of like a similar,
in the box, right?
Yeah, in the box, smash mouth sort of strong safety position. He also played for Gus Bradley, who has a very similar defense to Dan Quinn. And so I think it makes a lot of sense. They were buying low on getting a replacement strong safety. They struggled a lot against the Titans last week. I think that'll help them. I think it's a good trade for them. In turn, they dropped down 1 round in the 2020 draft from the 6th to the 7th. The Eagles now have 2 6th-round picks and 2 5th-round picks, although one of those 4 picks is hindered on Jordan Howard's conditional trade. Look, I think they needed special teams help. From what I was told, the Eagles were open to dropping LJ Fort throughout the first month of the season. They were looking for a replacement. They wanted that conditional pick.
They didn't play him a single snap on defense, so it was pretty obvious that was coming. Yeah,
right. Yeah, and he really wanted to play on defense. He signed with the Ravens outright right away. So clearly he had a market and wanted to get out. So you look at 2 new opportunities for 2 veteran players that were kind of stuck on the bench in Cyprien and Fort. The Eagles were able to make something out of nothing, get a better draft pick, and also a special teams ace who can contribute, and if he can't, so what? You don't have the stink of the 3rd-round pick on you anymore because you traded him. You know what I mean? You traded for him, and for nothing, pretty much. You could have cut Cyprien. We were talking about it the other day. Yeah. Cyprien's the 53rd guy on the roster. Yeah. So the fact that Howie was able to get something out of nothing, that's a typical Howie trade. That's a long thought. What's your first thought? Round 1, Zack.
So I wanted to start with Brandon Brooks. This dude, so I think Brandon Thorne, he's a really good analyst. He's really good at analyzing offensive line in particular. He did his quarter, first team all offensive line, and he had Jason Kelsey and Brandon Brooks in there. And it just made me think, I feel like, I know locally he gets a lot of love, but Brandon Brooks has played all but 10 snaps so far this season, coming off an Achilles injury. He basically didn't play full go in training camp. He didn't play in the preseason. He hasn't allowed a single sack or quarterback hit and has only allowed 2 pressures. He's been the best guard in the NFL. And I just think that dude just deserves so much praise for just the way he's battled back. And he even talked about when he showed up for that first day of training camp, and he's like, you guys were the ones that thought I wasn't going to be back. I thought, this is a chance for me to even take a step back and become even better than I was before. And you hear that a lot with guys that get hurt, but for an Achilles injury on a 300-pound offensive lineman, I think he's just been remarkable.
I know Alshon Jeffrey is the guy that a lot of people turn to when they say he's the best offensive signing of Howie Roseman's tenure, but I actually think Brandon Brooks. Yeah. You look at what he was able to do Carson's rookie year. He's just so consistent,
and he hasn't missed games, I don't think.
Right.
Yeah, which is think about that injury. He hasn't missed a game.
Well, think about the impact of when he had to come out against the Saints with the Achilles injury and how terrible Wisniewski was. The drop off was dramatic. So I think. You can argue, I think Malcolm Jenkins is the best free agent signing that Howie's ever had, but Brandon Brooks is a pretty close second, in my opinion. I think what he brings to the locker room, he's probably the most likable guys in there. He gets along with everybody, but then when you look at on the field, he is so efficient. Like you said, it's just, right guard's such an important position. I know this has become a passing league, but what he's been able to do from a pass protection standpoint, he's a better pass protector than any right guard in the league. There are some better run blockers, but when you look at his pass protection, he's phenomenal.
All right, what's your second thought?
Round 2, fight. I thought I did a pretty good job there.
That was pretty good, actually.
Corey Clement. So I'm somebody who kind of just studies transcripts from press conferences and kind of over analyzes stuff. Me. Who would have thought, right? Everyone who talks about the 3-man running back rotation. Well, the Eagles have 4 running backs. Yeah. I'm holding up 4, so that Zack knows.
Clement was a part of the 3-man rotation during the Super Bowl run.
Right. Some would argue he was probably the second runner-up for the MVP in the game. Yeah, in that game. The guy's produced over 850 total yards and 8 touchdowns in the regular season. He's a guy who's an accomplished offensive player. He also just lost his kick return job to Miles Sanders. Dave Phipp kind of confirmed that on Monday. So my question to Doug Peterson was, what role does he have on special teams that still justifies his position? Doug Peterson did the following.
It was so weird.
He paused. He
smiled.
It was really unnecessary. Supposedly I caught him off guard. Whatever. Anyway,
it was a strange moment for a very not like an intense question or anything.
Yeah, I thought it was a fair question.
Yeah. And then he answered in a way that made it obvious that Clement's just not part of the offense.
In a way that was actually pretty good. Yeah. Once he thought about it. Clement can be, he's typically the first guy out as the personal protector on punts. He can be a gunner. He's athletic. He looks like he's back to form. Against the Ravens in joint practices, he looked great. The thing is they trust Sproles in a way that they trust no one else. And then on top of that, you have Jordan Howard and Miles Sanders looking like they did against the Packers. And I just think, Clement's a guy that, they might have lost a little faith in last year. He had that quad injury in week 4, or he suffered in week 3, was out week 4 and 5, and then just didn't look like himself. Then he had the not the ACL injury, but the knee injury in week 14 off that awkward handoff by Carson Wentz, or week 13, sorry. And I just think, he's a guy that kind of became a forgotten man, and that's kind of how it feels. He's only played 3 offensive snaps in 3 games, and all 3 of those came in the first game, and he was basically like a fullback. So I'm interested to see what everybody else's take is on that, because to me, he's become a forgotten man, and yes, he can be a utility guy on special teams, but on a team where there's so many injuries, eventually does he become inactive, or how does that work out? What's your take?
Yeah. I just find it interesting that all offseason they were talking about him as like part of the rotation, and then now it's like Deuce Staley called it a 3-headed monster the other day, and then when he was asked, Corey Clement's one of those guys that for them to talk about him, you have to ask about him, which kind of says if a coach isn't thinking about you on the tip of their tongue. So I think you and I both thought he was going to have a bigger role than he wound up having this year. As early as week 2, I remember both of us thinking he was going to get some carries at least that week because they switched the rotation up each week. It's surprising. I don't know if he's going to be here long term based on the way this has gone, but he's helping his value around the league by showing that he can be a special teams guy. So he'll be in the league for a long time, even if it's just because of that.
Well, and he's a guy who's a team first dude. He's not going to complain. He's not going to cause trouble. But it does kind of sound like that we're nearing the end.
He'll be a restricted free agent this offseason. You don't need to keep unless they might lose Howard, I guess, and Sproles in theory will retire.
We've seen guys like Wendell Smallwood
stick around.
Yeah, stick around. So, still number 28 is open, man.
Respect to playing a decent amount in Washington too.
Yeah. So, you need all hands on deck in that situation.
Man, that team is so bad.
But yeah, I, to close out on Corey, I do wonder if they suffer an injury in the second half, and he becomes like a very good replacement for Sproles or for Sanders, because I think that's the value that's there.
All right, so my second thought to Sidney Jones. So it seems like anytime we ask, Jim Schwartz or Corey Unlin or Doug Peterson about at what point are you concerned about all the soft tissue injuries that he's dealing with, and they kind of deflect the question every single time. I don't want to read too much into that, but I think it's become a legitimate concern in the building, and I think he's clearly a talented player, but I don't know if he's not, putting on the right bulk or what it is, but he just can't stay healthy. And he hasn't had a stretch where he stayed healthy for 3 games in a row in his NFL career. I don't think I think it's fair to say that. And I want, when we did those trade offers, I had Sidney Jones as one of the guys, and he has less value now than he did then, and his value wasn't crazy high back then either. So I don't know what the future. They're going to keep trying to develop him. I just until he can prove that he can stay healthy, though, I don't see how you can rely on him to be one of your top 2 corners long term.
Yeah, it kind of seems like he's like the new Victor Abiramiri, where there's so much promise there, and there's a lot you like from his college career, and he's very athletic. Victor Abiramiri was a defensive end they took up
from Notre Dame.
From Notre Dame that everybody loved.
I remember him.
Kind of had the makeup of the next Justin Tuck. And he turned out to be
he flamed out pretty quick too.
Yeah, he did. And the thing is upside's great, but you need to be able to develop it, and you need to be available.
Yeah, you need to play.
Availability is the number 1 ability in the NFL. As a lot of coaches, ironically,
on this team, it definitely is.
Right, and and at this point, speaking about Corey Clement, ironically. Doug Peterson said it's tough to come back from an injury as a young player when the team is moving forward.
Especially with the guys that they added this offseason. Yeah.
Right. And so when you look at the cornerback position, Rasul's playing relatively well. He had a terrible first game, but outside of that, he's played pretty well. They're bringing in these new guys. Craig James can emerge, or, Jalen Mills can come back and play well, or Trayvon LeBlanc can play well. Where can Sidney Jones fit in all this? And I think... they've talked about playing him in this game. Hamstring injuries are really tough. Part of the reason why Sidney Jones missed extended periods of time, and Darren Sproles too, is because they had setbacks with those hamstring injuries. It's very difficult. Then again, you saw both Goddard and Jeffrey come back at 1 week after.
Those injuries are just weird.
Yeah, so you never know. But yeah, not a good look for Sidney.
All right, what you got for your last one?
Round 3. Fight!
That means we tied in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, it's true. We went to
Mortal Kombat speed.
We went to Mortal Kombat overtime.
Sudden death.
So I think when we look at this roster and you talk about the guys that are coming back, I think one of the biggest returns is Kamu Grugier-Hill, who played on a snap count against the Packers. He played, I think, 13 snaps.
Did jump off sides on one.
Yeah, he didn't look terrific, but he was getting used to the speed of the game. He kind of allows you to cut LJ Fort.
Didn't Ken Flagel talk about his recovery and all that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's about timing, and it's about, getting your body used to it. I mean, he's been out for more than a month. So, and he was having a great training camp before he got injured. Some would say he was probably the standout of that first week. But he's a guy who's eventually going to play a bigger role on defense, which then frees up Duke Riley to kind of take on some of his special teams responsibilities. But he is also a special teams captain, and I think the Eagles were really waiting for Kamu, for that veteran presence on special teams, to return before they got rid of LJ Fort. And I think before LJ Fort had his Eagles fatality, Kamu had to show something, and I think he did the other night. While he didn't play well, I think he showed that he is capable of playing on Sundays moving forward.
Yeah, I definitely think that was more that he's having his preseason over these first few weeks, basically. So for my last point, so there's been a lot of talk about the Eagles' lack of sacks. There's been a lot of argument in there's people who have been saying sacks don't matter, and the Eagles have the 5th or 6th best pressure rate in the NFL. And then there's the flip side of that, where they literally are last in the NFL in sacks. They only have 3, and only one of them has come from a defensive end. It was a strip sack. It was a great one from Derek Barnett. But if they don't start, I know it's good to pressure the quarterback, and just the very basic sack number isn't necessarily indicative of a good defense. What matters, what happens, what you do with the sacks and all that. But if they don't start getting, especially this week against a really bad Jets offensive line, maybe the worst in the NFL, or one of the worst at least, if they don't start getting their act together in terms of finishing those pass rushes, then I think it's time to be legitimately concerned about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're completely correct. I think, Derek Barnett got the sack strip, and that was an encouraging sign. Obviously, Brandon Graham has piled up pressures. And talking to Philip Daniels, the defensive line coach, he said that he preaches getting quarterbacks off their spot to make mistakes, and that sacks are quote-unquote bonuses, which I know frustrated a lot of people in the Eagles fan base when I tweeted that out. But I see the logic in it. If you sack a guy, you're bringing them down for a loss, but if it's not on 3rd down, they have another shot. If you can force them to
force a turnover, to 4th down.
If you can get a sack strip, or you can get
force a 4th down. And punt it,
you know what I mean.
Turnover.
That's basically it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
which is what Jim Sports' point usually is, but
which I think there's a logic there. The issue for me is when there are lulls and quarterbacks are able to climb the pocket and move around like Matt Stafford and Aaron Rodgers have, it makes it very difficult on your secondary, who's already handicapped, no pun intended, because of their either lack of ability or their injuries. So I think there's logic to complaining about it. I think there's also logic to the mission at hand. And I think, look, this Jets offensive line is bad. It's bad. I used to cover Kelvin Beachum in Jacksonville, and he's extremely undersized for a left tackle. You can work power against him. His base isn't that great. I'm shocked he's still a starting left tackle in this league.
Ryan Khalil's been terrible since coming back.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happens when you take an entire summer off.
Yeah.
You can't be like Josh McCown where you just sit behind Carson Wentz. And then look, if Luke Falk's the starting quarterback, I could probably host a 4-hour podcast on how bad of a quarterback Luke Falk is. And I don't like to overly criticize, but his tape in college was horrific. And that's the same program that Gardner Minshew came out of, and he looked great on tape.
But Jim Schwartz says you kind of prepare the same way for every quarterback, though. So
I mean, look,
maybe he's just saying you just don't prepare for Luke Falk.
Well, and here's the thing, too. If Sam Darnold's back there, he's a guy that kind of plays hero ball and makes some really stupid throws.
Yeah. But he also has that escapability that has hurt the Eagles in the
past. Correct. Yeah. But I think you can force him into mistakes and feel good about that and do some of those disguised blitzes, which they've done pretty well the last 2 weeks. So, yeah, I mean, look, I don't think this game should be close. If it's within a touchdown score, there's going to be some flack.
Yeah, it can't be close. Yeah. Even if it wouldn't look good if they started slow in the first half and killed them the second, but like don't start slow. Like just don't do it.
Zack Rosenblatt says don't start off slow.
Really hot take there. Yeah. All right, before we go, I'll just read a few comments from our post game from Thursday night. Keep these coming. We love reading these. I'll start here with Ron Mexico. He says Sendejo has hurt more of his own teammates than anyone in league history.
I don't know if that's necessary.
Yeah, that's probably not true. But I think it's well established to our listeners how I feel about Andrew Sendejo and his playing style, and I wrote about it today. His teammates love him, and at least they say they do, and the coaching staff especially loves him, so he's not going anywhere.
I mean, but they also kind of have silence to themselves because he is the Night King, and there's it's hard to get anything out of him when it comes to him.
Schulier Allen says, cut Matt Pryor or use him in a trade. Keep Nate Herbig. I know you agree with that, although I will say
wholeheartedly
today, Big V was playing center with Jason Kelsey out of practice, which I don't know if that bodes exactly well for Nate Herbig.
I'm just wondering if it's because, they're installing and Herbig was probably playing on the scout team center. So that means that, and actually his body type fits what Ryan Khalil is, Ryan Khalil. But yeah, that's interesting. But you do need, if you have 7 guys active, Dillard's not playing center. So, if you don't want to move Isaac Seumalo to center and keep him at left guard, maybe that's the thought process.
Yeah. Audrey Ferber says, great stream, guys, get some sleep. I agree. We need sleep on Thursday night. That's
we sure. Still need it, to be honest.
Let's see. This guy says, I don't like podcasts. Thank you for telling us that. That's really nice of you.
The more you know.
Greg Cabela says, hope Avonte Maddox is okay. That said, he's the worst defensive back I've ever seen in an Eagles uniform. So at least he preempted it by saying, I hope he's doing okay.
I mean, there's a lot of studies that show that he is not the worst.
Oh, yeah. They've had some, just like Bradley Fletcher would like a word.
I'm thinking about like Dimitri Patterson, Ellis Hobbs. Joselio Hansen was okay for a little while.
Nnamdi when he's here was pretty bad.
Yeah, Nnamdi wasn't very good, no.
All right, we'll wrap up on that note. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll have our preview podcast on Friday as usual. Leave us some comments on any of the podcast apps or YouTube. Write us reviews. And thanks for listening.